Can I have your attention, please? So we're going to get started. First and foremost, thank you for everybody for coming. Mark, thank you for taking the time out of your day to make this happen too. I'm not going to make this a long introduction. I'm just going to say this. I just had a meeting with Mark Weiss, and I hope that in the next 45 minutes or so, you get to feel the power like I just felt in the meeting I just had with him. So without further ado, Mark Weiss.
Hello, everybody. So I want to speak for a few minutes about what we do and how we could track our careers and be a bit more successful. The difference between good and great isn't all that large. I just came from the TAG conference where Coach Kirby Smart from the University of Georgia gave a motivational speech. And he said something that was really cool. He said that the number one golfer on the PGA last year earned $9.9 million in prize money. The number 8 golfer earned about $5 million in prize money. It's about a $5 million delta. And this is after 86 rounds of golf. That's a lot of rounds of golf. What was their average stroke differential per round? Anyone want to take a guess? 0.48. So 0.48, not even half a stroke, not even half a putt, is the difference between $10 million and $5 million. How many times have we come up short in anything that we've done by just a little bit? It doesn't matter if it's sports, if it's business, if it's getting a meeting with a client, or if you're pitching a piece of business, whether you got it or you didn't. We've all lost, and sometimes we lose by a very narrow margin. And so the question is, what could we have done better and differently before we had our shot so that we could elevate our chances of success? And I'd like to speak about some of those things now and try to translate it directly into what we do. Abraham Lincoln was once asked, because he had this, sort of reputation as a backwoodsman or whatever he was, he tried to come up with a persona that he was a man of the people and he was folksy, not a millionaire railroad lawyer. And they said, how would you chop down, a 100-year-old oak tree if you had 6 hours to do it? And he thought for a second. He said, well, I'd spend the first 4 hours sharpening my axe. Today, I'm going to suggest to everyone in this room that we should be sharpening our axes before we engage, because when we do engage, the stakes are very high. There's very little room for error in a competitive landscape. If you pitch a no-hitter, maybe CBRE is going to pitch a perfect game. So what are you going to do to be better the next time you go out to see a tenant? So it goes without saying that every new broker should know the market. And I know for a fact that most new brokers here don't know the market. I know that's hard to hear, but I've asked brokers, when they come up and say hello, where's 599 Lexington Avenue? And they repeat the address, which means they don't know where it is. Then they think, well, I know it's on Lexington Avenue. I know Chrysler's 405, so it's somewhere north, and they guess. And they have about a 1 in 18 shot of getting it right. And they're usually plus or minus 3 or 4 blocks off. So what do we sell? Anybody?
Real estate.
We sell real estate.
It's a service.
We sell service? No, we sell real estate. Let me say it again. We're real estate brokers. We get paid to transact real estate transactions. If you want a consultant, you should hire Accenture. But if you want real estate, you're going to call a real estate broker, and that's what we do. Sure, we should provide service. Sure, we should justify our fee every minute of every hour of every day that we're engaged. But at the end of the day, it's about knowing the market. So now you're all going to run back to whatever resources you have and learn the market a bit better. so that you can be an encyclopedia on the market. Nobody in this room who's new can be as knowledgeable on the intricacies of tenant advocacy as someone who's been doing it for 10 years. You can't control your experience, but everybody in this room can control how much market knowledge they have. You can know the market better than me. You can know a slice of the market better than anybody. It's just that upfront preparation. It's not, well, let me go connect, let me network, and then when I find out about a requirement, then I'm going to do my homework. That's the reverse order. It doesn't work. You've got to invest the time and capital up front before you engage, and that's really hard because it doesn't feel like it's directly translatable to dollars. So now you've learned the market, you've gone through all the educational courses that Cushman Wakefield has, and you've got a meeting with a tenant. It could be a presentation meeting, but more than likely it's a first meeting. What should you know about that tenant? Anybody? James, what should you know?
All the details you can find out on their lease, past broker, anything going on internally in the company, if they're growing, if they're downsizing, any mergers, acquisitions, ownership of the company, whoever it may be.
So you should learn a lot about the company for sure.
Correct.
And we have, in our research department, you could order up a research report that they put together for you about the client you're going to meet with. Has anyone used that? Does anyone find it helpful? I find them really helpful because instead of having to piece this stuff together myself, it's like getting an executive briefing. You walk in the room, you know a good bit about them. You also should know a lot about their building. How many times have people visited a building and not know who the owner is? Everybody's lying because it happens all the time. When you have a tenant meeting, where are you getting your stack information? Are you relying on CoStar? Are you relying on our databases? Because they're all wrong and they're horrible. You have to do hard work and figure out how to get in and spot check floors and get a good stack done. And when you get that good stack done, you'll have a knowledge advantage. So think, you're meeting a tenant. Now you know a lot about the tenant. Now you know a lot about their building. You know, you have x-ray vision into their building because now you're going to know stuff on their debt which they don't know. And you're going to know something about their landlord. And you don't even know if they want to talk about their landlord. But those are the sort of upfront things that you should be doing, which is just brute hard work. So when I hear a young broker say, I make calls 8 hours a day, A, I know it's a lie, but B, I don't see how you can do that because you're going to have some meetings and there's a lot of work that has to be done to get ready to go out into the marketplace and engage so that you can carry the Cushman Wakefield card and walk in there with an informational advantage relative to your peers. If you do that, there's going to be times you've done all this work and you're meeting with an office manager or you're meeting with a guy who's going to say, hey, what do you got for me? Which everyone's had those meetings and they're awful. But there's going to be some times where you're going to be confident and you're going to sit across the table and they're going to ask you a question and you're going to answer the question with an answer. What does that mean? Anybody? How much is answered with a number? When is answered with a date or a time? Why is answered with a story? If the first two questions are asked and you're telling a story, it's because you're woefully unprepared and you're covering, you're deflecting. So I'm planting that seed with everybody in the room so that you could all feel where there's room for improvement, because remember, you're going to get your opportunity and you've got to be ready for it. You've got to prepare. You've got to take those extra 20 putts a day or those extra 20 chips a day, or whatever it is those golfers do after they practice all the time to get that half a stroke differential so that you go from $4 million to $10 million. It's the extra work that you prepare to do before you engage that will make you a better broker in each instance. And it's hard because you could tell whoever you work for, I made 60 calls today. But you can't tell them, yeah, I got thrown out of 2 buildings. I'm trying to figure out the debt. It's not recorded anywhere. I'm learning all this stuff. I'm reading research reports, and I'm canvassing. It doesn't feel like it's accretive. But all of this work will make every other call you make in that building a hell of a lot better. And if you make better calls, instead of getting 1 meeting, you may get 4 meetings, and now you're leveraging off your hard work. That's one tool. It's basic, but most people don't do it because they haven't been told to do it, but we all must do it. So here's a tool young brokers should do. Pick subleases that seem like they're good value and go see them. Repeat, go see them. Don't look them up in CoStar, look at the plan, go see them. Feel them. If the agent says, unless you have a tenant, I'm not showing it to you, you tell your senior broker that they said that, and that agent won't say that again, because that's an inappropriate thing for anyone to say, and you shouldn't feel that you need to tell someone who your tenant is if you're previewing space. Because every Monday morning, I look at space. Why? I got to be fresh on the market. I got to feel the market. I don't get good ideas sitting at my desk. I get them when I'm seeing and touching the bricks and mortar that make up our business. But put together a little matrix of great subleases. Know these subleases, know them really well. So now when you're banging out your calls and you get a tenant on the phone who gives you the slightest whiff of, hey, I might be interested in growing, you can say there are tremendous off-market deals, subleases where there's a degree of distress, where you can take advantage of that distress and make a compelling deal. Can I tell you about a few of them? He may say, yeah, come on in, or he say, sure, shoot. Now you've got 2 or 3, boom. Can we talk, and can I come in and show you the floor plans and explain to you why these might be extraordinary value? Yeah, I would see you. Why? Because you were prepared when you called, and you're an encyclopedia of service, real estate, because that's what we sell. But this is hard work too. You're preparing a survey. You're doing all of this upfront work, and you don't even have a client for it yet. And the operative word in that sentence is yet. You'll have it. What did they say in Bull Durham? Build it and they will come. Build it. The company's not going to build it for you. You need to take that initiative and build it yourself. So then you get in the habit of doing really cool matrices, and it becomes a work tool on a deal where you can then present things to a tenant. And everything that you do will build on something else. Every building you look at will build on something else. Every piece of knowledge you have will build on something else. I use these matrices to help translate things into a nomenclature that I'm comfortable with, that the tenant will appreciate because it's thoughtful. I'll give tenant objective and subjective information at lots of different waypoints during a transaction. Or if I'm meeting a tenant, I'll take a sanitized version and show them what we do along the lines of a project. Because it's one thing to someone to talk about what they do, but to show a piece of work product and then translate it is the difference between being special and being like everybody else. And you can go into lots of detail. I tend to do that. It's very empowering to clients. And remember, if you make a 10-year deal for 10,000 feet, the tenant's paying $60 a foot, it's a $200,000 commission. Isn't there a lot of service that should go into us earning that commission? Shouldn't all of our work product be beautiful? Shouldn't we be able to use all of our work product as sales tools in our next meeting so we don't have to torture Melissa and Danielle every time we have a new presentation? Think about that. A lot of times I have tenant meetings, and Amy prepares me for it because we have something called a grab and go drawer, which is sanitized work product from transactions. Sanitized because you never want to give away confidential information or a tenant name. If it's beautiful enough, you can use that for a first meeting. You wouldn't use it for a presentation, but for I call them higher meetings. It's great to have stuff because tenants like to see and touch stuff. So here's some more stuff. You can think of something thoughtful about the market and make your own market presentation. You don't have to use the Cushman Wakefield presentation. Just talking about absorption. Does anybody ever talk about absorption to tenants when they meet them or speak to them on the phone? Any hands? Nobody. What do we talk about? What do we talk about to tenants when we meet them? What do we talk about?
Piece of information I know about something going on in the building, something I've done for a client in the past that I perceive as similar to what what's going on in their organization.
Good. But you should also be prepared to talk about the market. So even if it's a simple absorption slide, who doesn't know what absorption is? Anybody? Does everybody know how you measure absorption?
No.
Who had the courage to say that? So the total market's 430 million square feet of space. If you build a 1 million square foot building and you plop it down, that's negative 1 million square feet of absorption. If a tenant rents it, that's no absorption. If a tenant goes into an existing building and rents 500,000 square feet of space that's vacant, but leaves behind 700,000 square feet of space, that's negative 200,000 square feet of absorption. If you think about that, it takes a lot of positive activity and growth to have meaningful positive absorption in such a big market. That's how you measure a market. You could do fun things like have research layer in the stock market. Here's a cool thing. Absorption, how much space gets added to a market or subtracted from a market, tends to trail the Dow by about 9 months. The stock market collapsed during the credit crisis. There was only material negative absorption 9 months later. After the stock market rebounded, then the real estate market caught up. Now that's a cool thought. That's something that once you now have talked about the things that are relevant to that tenant and they ask you about the market, you know something. These are the things, this is the sharpening of the axe, the things that you should prepare and do and know and study sooner rather than later. If you're going to prepare this for a meeting, it's too late. You should prepare these kind of things that you're comfortable with and practice presenting them and talking about them so that when you're in front of a tenant, it's going to be very natural and you're going to be just a bit better than you ordinarily would, and you'll trim that half a stroke off your game.
How would you suggest using that? Call it an elevator pitch, or you have the guy on the phone for 45 seconds, you have to sell them on why you should come in. How would you, because just throwing a random stat at them probably won't appease them, how would you work that into a quick conversation or a quick?
On a Canvas call or in an elevator? I'm confused.
On a Canvas call, but I just used the
Okay.
elevator pitch. On a Canvas call, are you saying that you're suggesting this for initial?
Mr. Gastel, I know you're bombarded by real estate brokers. And I also know your lease is coming up in 3 years, and everyone's pushing to meet you now because they're telling you that time is not on your side. We have a counter-cyclical view at Cushman and Wakefield. We think time is going to work exquisitely well for you, and we're prepared to back that up with some analytics. Can we come in and talk to you about that? It'll take 15 minutes. Thanks. Boom. Okay, you asked a question. I offered him something that was thoughtful, that made him feel good, because he doesn't want to do anything so fast. And he is getting bombarded, and now you're the voice of reason and the credibility of Cushman and Wakefield. I don't know if that's the appropriate thing to say on a call, but we should all have some tools that we can use for whatever the situation might dictate. I think that's my last slide.
Mark, I have a question on that slide. So the consistency of both the Dow Jones and the rate of absorption probably has to do with jobs, if I had to guess, job growth and reduction. But now the 9 month that you mentioned, is that an actual average? Because that's how long it usually takes for a company to right size or terminate their space. Or was that just a random number?
Not too many people who are new were working at the end of 2008.
Right.
But AIG went bust, Merrill Lynch went bust, Lehman Brothers went bust, Bear Stearns went bust. I mean, everybody got hammered. The quarter ending December 31st, 2008 was the highest average asking rental quarter according to Jones Lang LaSalle, Cushman Wakefield, and CBRE. Because the market moves on trades, and there were no trades. It freezes. When there's a fall here, the market seizes up. And then there becomes an inflection point. The tenants are saying, hey, wake up, Mr. Landlord, I'm not paying these prices. And the landlords are saying, but I just got those prices. And they stare at each other across the precipice, and somebody blinks. Here they blinked. And when they blink, they all blink at the same time, and there's panic, and prices fall. That's my experience of how it works. Did I answer your question?
Oh, yes, I understand that. I was just wondering if there was a specific number. Here's how many months it takes from the time where you see Dow Jones going down until you see positive absorption, for example.
Well, positive absorption tends to come when companies, CFOs, have visibility into their businesses, when the stock market's pretty good, when their sales are pretty good, and they'll make forward commitments, long-term commitments for office space. So the economy's got to be good for that to happen. So the economy's got to be good first, and then that happens. You don't say, hey, I think the economy's going to turn and be really great, so I'm going to take down another 3 floors. Human nature just doesn't work that way. So does anyone else have any questions or thoughts regarding anything I spoke about on this topic?
So Mark, just to underscore what you said about the 4 hours of sharpening the axe, I've seen too many times people young in the industry are dialing for dollars, right? So they need to make, 50 calls a day to try to get to somebody, and because they haven't done the homework, the hard work, if they, God forbid, get a decision maker on the phone, the conversation goes nowhere. So assume that you're going to get one bite at the apple, and hopefully you'll get that call to somebody who will grant you a meeting or at least show interest. You want to be prepared as possible. And it's hard work, and the daily life of checking emails and socializing and grabbing coffee will distract you. But one of our senior brokers in New Jersey, Mark Rosenberg, who's very successful, uses a sports analogy. And he said, if you are the type of person that doesn't like to practice, finds an excuse not to practice, or it's just not in your DNA to practice, know that someplace out there, there's going to be somebody that is practicing. And when you do meet that person, they're going to beat you every day of the week. Right? So that's an internal thing, as well as for our competitors. It's just got to be done. It's the basics of what you do as a broker.
That's perfect.
I guess my question off of that would be how, like day to day, I think a lot of people are asking themselves, how do we balance that act between making phone calls and sourcing business, but then sharpening our axe?
Do you schedule your day?
No.
Okay. That'd probably be a pretty good start. Right? Block out a time where you're canvassing, block out a time where you're looking at space.
Would you be able to, again, put a metric to how many hours somebody just coming into the business should be on the phones versus how long later is it to each person?
You know, I want to defer to Aaron on that, because there's no one size fits all for that. So if you want to work with someone to get a schedule as to what your activity should be, you do with him. And you should choreograph your week. It'll be a much more productive week. A much more productive week. Like, by habit, I never come to the office first stop on a Monday morning. I see space. I try to see 3 different things before I come in. Mondays are a little slow anyway. And, I'm like usually full of vim and vigor. So I want to start my week that way. I feel like I have an advantage over the rest of the world when I do it that way.
Mark, tell us about that. Is there a rhyme or reason to you selecting spaces that you're previewing?
I'm fortunate. At this point in my career, I've seen so much of this marketplace that when any part's changing or there's a part that I just want to field more, like I called David Berkey from L&L, gave me a tour of 425 Park. I thought it was pretty cool. I hadn't been there before. A couple months before that, I did it with Arcadia. I went through, the Sony building. Has everyone been through the Sony building? How many have been through the Sony building? Raise your hands as high as I could see them. Okay. How many people are in the business of renting office space? How many? Raise them. This is tepid. Raise your hand, please. So now, it's like most people are in the business of doing that, and you haven't seen a major renovation at 55th and Madison? Why? Is it because you're so busy? No. Is it because you think the answer is on CoStar? Yes. And the answer is not on CoStar. Success is not on your computer. It's out in the market. You got to feel it. You're going to be on the phone with someone who's going to say, yeah, what's going on in the Chippendale building? Why do they call it the Chippendale building? Anyone know?
Top of the building.
Right. Who designed that building? Your Aunt, Philip Johnson. Right. So it's an architecturally unique building. It's a cool building, and it's going through a cool renovation in the middle of our market, and most people haven't seen it. Why? Because you're not sharpening your axe. You're sitting there just waiting for the tree to fall. And that's not good practice. So if anything, I'm trying to motivate everyone to get out of the office, do their homework, be very diligent, work just a little bit harder than CBRE, and the chances of you succeeding are much, much higher. In fact, it will be very hard to fail if you do all of that work. And it will be even harder to succeed if you don't.
How would you suggest for brokers who maybe don't have seniors who are well done in the conservatory, look at 550 Madison? There are some brokers who represent buildings like a 550 where maybe they will walk a group of associates through the building. How would you recommend that they go about trying to set goals for that?
I would ask Aaron to do it. You think they're going to say no to him when he's going to say, I'm going to bring a bunch of Cushman Wakefield brokers through?
Probably not.
Right. Because if he did say no, then he'd call the owner and say, your agent is too busy to show 8 of my brokers through your building. Can we talk about replacing your agent?
Yeah.
So look, you work at a great company with leverage. Don't be afraid to use it. Anyone who doesn't want to show a bunch of brokers their space is nuts. We're in the business to rent space, especially an agent. And I don't think anyone would say no. And if they did say no, boy, they're a jerk. Anyone else? Okay, I think we covered a lot of ground, and by the silence, I was either very good or very bad. Thank you all very much for coming.